I learned a couple of things. One, how to manage if you're stuck in a situation with a bully, how to manage one from the ground up. I was second in the company, and I won't spend a lot of time talking about this person, but one of the things I learned was, these people that create toxic work environments, specifically toxic work, they're very powerless, fearful, scared. In this case, men. It's not all men, it's women too, but in this case, he was a scared guy. And once I figured out what was really going on with him, which was all bark and very little bite, I just learned how to take a problem that he would bring and complain and threaten and whatever about, and just turn it back to him and turn it back to him. When you look at a bully and when you look at a powerless person and say, hey, Eric, so what do you think we should do about that? When you take a leader by the hand and you just ask them, well, what are you going to do about it? When they're complaining about a problem or complaining, in this case, he always had a problem with my people. My people were never selling enough. They were in customer facing positions on trucks, supposed to be acting like professional sales reps. No wonder they weren't selling. We can go down that path. I learned to manage him by putting the question back to him, which would typically lower the temperature of the other.
Welcome to the RockstarsRocking podcast, powered by Voluntary Disruption, a show dedicated to people who are crushing their business and life goals. These are bite-sized conversations with leading rock stars in their respective industry who are pumped to share their story to help drive you to the next level. So, are you ready to rock? Speaking of rock stars, here's your host, Eric Silverman.
Hey, rock stars, welcome back to another episode of RockstarsRocking. I am excited to have a rock star. I tell you what, a rock star of all rock stars. I've been following this guy for a long time. Everybody welcome and meet my good friend, Michael David Chapman, founder of LeadIn Social out of the New Hampshire area. And Michael, I'm going to get right into it, man. First off, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Eric. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for asking. Michael, you have an interesting story. I'd call it a journey, right? I don't know if you describe it that way as well. I mean, we all have a journey in some respect, but your journey, I really find fascinating, and I've been following it for quite a while. And for those that don't know Michael, and I don't know anybody that doesn't know you. I mean, my God, you have almost 300,000 followers on LinkedIn alone. I've got a paltry, not even 30,000. And I tell you what, you get a lot of attention out there on LinkedIn, in the social media world. And to me, I'll tell everybody why I'm fascinating. I find your story to be very refreshing and very, I think it's a buzzword overused these days, is authentic, but it is authentic. I mean, you're just sharing what you've gone through in your life over the last many years. And I believe that a lot of people can resonate to it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so, I never planned on telling it. So every now and again, about twice a year since that time, I think, man, the stuff I talk about, on LinkedIn, like in 2009, when I got on the platform, I think it was like 2008, 2009, I was looking for a job. No one was sharing personal stories, right? I mean, you didn't share personal stories in an interview, much less publicly for your ex-coworkers or potential new coworkers to read. So it has been quite the experience, for sure.
Yeah, well, it's funny. One of the questions I was going to ask you as we get into it, I was going to say, when did you really get into LinkedIn? And be it that you just said 2008, 2009. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn was really only a recruiting site, a job searcher site, for what it's worth.
Yeah, it was a great place to find a Forbes article or see some type of news update. I mean, they were still figuring it out. For me, up from that eight or 9 year period up until about four years ago last month, up until that point, it was just a place to find talent and look for position if I made a job change. In August of 2017, I made a really, it took about a year and a half to make this decision, but I decided to walk away from a job without a job, meaning I disclosed to the owner of the company that, hey, I feel like I'm losing what's left of my family, specifically my 4 kids. I felt called to leave or disclose that without looking for a position on his time. And it's interesting because at that point I had like 3 coaches. One of them was, 2 are on the payroll, one wasn't, put it that way. And one of them was a little bit more on the career side. Say, you're crazy, on one sense, but it's a pretty bold step. It just was this thing for me, where it was all about slaying that fear of could I get rehired? If I don't get a job before I leave a job, I won't get a job, was what in its simplistic form. So I got back on LinkedIn to look for a position like most people do. I mean, where else do you go? Right. It's, there's other job boards and job search, sites and stuff like that. But LinkedIn was the place for me. And the rest is, I started sharing my story. There's more to it, but that's the short story.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that sounds like the quintessential leap of faith, right? It's a leap of faith. You went all out. You threw caution to the wind and said, I'm all in with respect to the path you were looking to make. And, I tell you, I have, and I suspect you do as well. I have a lot of connections and friends and even family that would love to take that leap of faith, but have never done it. They have never, they would never even dare to do it, just based on the fact that they got so many bills and expenses and what they would deem priorities. But they've said to me many times, I'm losing my family. I think I might have to get a divorce, or my kids this or my kids that, and I feel bad because I can't be there for them. And I said it yesterday in a conversation I had, but life is always about choices. You have to choose what makes the best sense for where you're at in your journey. And you did that. So can we unpack that a little bit? So it's August of 2017. I mean, you clearly have it stated right there on your LinkedIn for anybody that wants to read it, but I'd love to hear it from your own words. It's August of 2017 and things aren't going well. Take it from there.
Well, I was working, we had moved when it was still it was a we in 2013 when we moved here. So for almost 5 years, actually 5 years to the day, but up until that point was like, 4 years and about 8-9 months, I was in a very, very toxic work relationship. And so people will say all the time, if you listen to, and this makes sense, and I had done this earlier in my career, if you're in a toxic work relationship, leave. And I completely get that and support that. For me at the time, because at the same time I was going through that, I was going through a painful divorce. And that was tough to if you know anybody that's been through that, or you've been through that, or anyone listening's been through that, you know what I'm talking about. I wasn't confident that I could sit through an interview and really perhaps not just project my best abilities, and I'd gotten good results in previous positions, but more importantly, I didn't want to take any of the stuff I was still going through in my personal life into my next role. So I sort of white knuckled, sucked it up and figured out a way for the 2 years before I left that company, how to manage this guy, how to manage a toxic boss. Taught me a lot. And you talk about steps of faith. That's probably the larger story, because I've never really unpacked that. But, when I got to the summer of 17, I was doing a lot of just soul searching. I was on my knees a lot, like I've got to leave this place. And, I was a non-degree professional over the age of 40, really in a geography where the kind of work that I do, I didn't see a lot of opportunity at the time. And I never planned on being an entrepreneur. It was always going to be, quit and find something else. And so the final sort of straw was when, I was being mentored by some really solid men who were helping me. One was, a couple of coaches, and one was a mentor. And I'll never forget, one of my good mentors, we were golfing, and I was on the 15th green. We had just sunk our putts or whatnot. He just grabbed me he'd listened to me the whole round, hemming and hawing about everything bad that was going to happen, and no one's going to hire me, and I'm divorced, and I got 4 kids. Just all the stuff that you do. I'm not, for anyone going through that, I get it. But he just grabbed me by the shoulders, and he said, he just finally looked at me and said, just effing leave. And, this is at the end of him saying, look, don't worry about that. You don't worry about what you have in your checking account or your savings or your reserves or any of that. Just leave, like God's got you. And so I had a few more affirmations early that week because it was coming out of a Saturday round of golf early that week. And the next week I had prepared, some notes and went into the owner's office and just bared my soul and said, listen, I want to be closer to my kids. This is what I'm going to do. And I was able, because of that, God honored that. I was able to negotiate. I mean, the owner, as toxic as the relationship was, something like the skies open up and I was able to negotiate a 4-month runway.
Whoa.
To stay from August of 17 until the end of the year. So that decision, and again, I'm not, everybody's journey is different, but I'm saying for me, I worked from home from August of 17 until the end of that year, looking for a job. I never found one. That's a separate conversation, but that's basically how the story goes, how it went.
So you said a lot there. I mean, first off, let's talk about, a toxic work relationship. What did you learn from dealing with your personal toxic work relationship and the epiphany you had and you leaving and giving your notice and all that stuff? What did you learn? Maybe 1 or 2 things that you may be able to share with somebody listening, because there's no doubt people listening or watching here on YouTube that are going through the same exact thing right now.
Really, when you're in a situation, I'll back up a bit. A lot of people will say, just leave, just leave, just leave. And a lot of times there's a little bit of, and just leave. I get that. At the same time, it's not always that one dimensional. Sometimes people are in situations where they can't see themselves out of it. There are no other jobs. They're in geographies or they've pigeonholed themselves 12 years into their career, you name it. They don't feel like they can leave. They don't understand. They've over leveraged themselves with debt. They can't look at their debt situation or whatever their obligations. Say, you know what, if it doesn't get paid, that's fine. I'm not living here anymore. It takes a while for people to get to that point. It took me longer because again, I was so preoccupied with what was going on at home, and that was pretty obvious to everybody at work. I mean, I was pretty much taxed by that. I learned a couple of things. One, how to manage if you're stuck in a situation with a bully, how to manage one from the ground up. I was second in the company and, I won't spend a lot of time talking about this person, but one of the things I learned was, these people that create toxic work environments, specifically toxic work, they're very powerless, fearful, scared. In this case, men. It's not all men, it's women too, but in this case, he was a scared guy. And once I figured out what was really going on with him, which was all bark and very little bite, I just learned how to take a problem that he would bring and complain and threaten and whatever about, and just turn it back to him and turn it back to him. When you look at a bully and when you look at a powerless person and say, hey, Eric, so what do you think we should do about that? When you take a leader by the hand and you just ask them, what are you going to do about it? When they're complaining about a problem or complaining, in this case, he always had a problem with my people. My people were never selling enough. They were in customer facing positions on trucks, supposed to be acting like professional sales reps. No wonder they weren't selling. We can go down that path. I learned to manage him by putting the question back to him, which would typically lower the temperature. The other thing I would say is, sometimes we're in situations, I learned a lot about me because some of his stuff I had. Not to that extreme, but some of the judgment, some of the jealousy, some of the anger, some of the guilt, all these sort of what we might call the enemies of the heart. He was a reflection of some of mine. So I learned how to manage him. I learned how to call his BS and lower the temperature in meetings and lower the temperature in work situations, which was a tax because it would tax me. But I also used the relationship to help me see where I had some of those issues. And so in between the meetings and in between the toxic situations, I had a long drive from New Bedford, Massachusetts back to New Hampshire. It's about 2 hours. I had a lot of time to think about how to manage him, but also, that whole thing of like, we see in people, not always, but we see in people what we see in ourselves. And so I had that, think about that, I had that 2-hour commute every day to reflect, not every day, most days. So I learned a lot about me.
So in some respect, as you said, I mean, it was like looking in a mirror in some capacity
Some of it.
to some extent. And,
Yeah.
I guess the question is, do you feel like, you were talking to yourself a little bit, and that was kind of leading up to what you ended up doing in 2017 with respect to leaving? Like you were kind of giving yourself that pep talk in some way?
That and that, again, like the recognition that, is best, you can be as mentored as you can be mentored by the best career coaches on the planet on how to interview the right kind of boss. I finally got to a point where, listen, there are no guarantees, except for there are no guarantees. That's probably the only guarantee. And that the longer that I waited, I just got to a point where the longer that I waited and that's why I got help. I had people helping me, helping encourage me. The longer that I waited, the more I was kicking the can of that reality. There are no guarantees. I could interview like a rock star for some company. And I don't mean like me, I mean like interviewing them. If I ever go back, I work for myself now. If I ever work for another company, they can interview me, but I promise you, I'm interviewing them.
Sure.
2 to 3x, because where I spend my time is really critical, and it should be for everyone. I just realized that I needed to get over that and accept that it could be worse, but that, I'd be okay. I made it this far. The lights are still on. We still have a good life, and we do. On this side of all of that sort of disappointment, we would be okay.
So are you sure that when you were at Georgia State studying business administration, you sure you didn't study psychology? Because it sounds like a lot of what you're talking about was you trying on those drives back and forth to psychologically figure out how you were going to approach your toxic relationship with your boss, to figure out how to get into his mind, maybe even some reverse psychology. And quite frankly, a lot of everything that we do in life is psychology, whether we know it or not. I mean, you know that.
When I was going through, I wouldn't say I did take one class, maybe two, I think one class, but no, I can't say that I studied it. I went through a pretty, say thick and detailed journey during my second breakup to really understand, one, to do what I could do around any reconciliation, but in tandem with that, really get clear on just maybe how messed up I was on the inside around fear, some codependency, some dominant stuff, other things. And so I did a lot of reading with specific authors, pastors, podcasts, and then in the non-digital space, like I had some men in my life. The reason I brought men into my life, I kind of highlight that, is I lived for 4 decades without really any strong male leadership in my life. I mean, it took me to get to age 40 to realize that, man, I had done well financially and done well in leadership, but I had somehow figured out a way outside of like work circles to sort of isolate myself. It was like me, my wife, and kids. And I had friends, but nobody was in on the inside. I wasn't trusting of that. And that came from growing up, without a father. And I just didn't trust men. Beyond what I had to at work, you're my boss. Okay, Eric. Okay, whatever. And then it's shallow, and maybe it got a little deeper than that. But, I've learned to say from my own journey that an isolated leader is a dangerous one in many ways. And outside of work, I was isolated. And so I saw a lot of that toxicity, that I was seeing at work. I'd see some of it in my personal life. And so, yeah, I wouldn't say I went on a path of psychology. I would just say, like, I wanted to understand, I wanted to come through a second divorce and have something better than a clue on how I got there. So I didn't return there.
So let's talk about that for a second, right? You, and I want to talk about you being an advocate and a champion for men and to help other men, based on how you've been helped and what you've gone through. But you have it right there on your LinkedIn profile. A painful second divorce, loss of a child, in fact, multiple job losses. You walked away from that toxic work environment, father of 4, et cetera, et cetera. I guess, and dare my bold question. I don't know how bold it is, but, I'm curious, to be honest with you, a lot of folks in your situation may have turned to alcohol dependency or even drugs over the years. Did that ever occur? Did that ever happen? Did that ever cross your mind? Are you that type of person? Because I know a lot of people listening are probably dealing with that as well.
Yeah, it's on both sides of my family. I never met my grandfathers. Alcoholism took my mom's dad with cirrhosis, I think when I was 4. I don't really remember anything. And then my father's father passed away when he was 15 from some type of alcohol related thing. My dad's an alcoholic. I saw it everywhere. The short answer is, yeah, it touched my life. I mean, when I was, in 2014, that summer, yeah, I turned to it for sure. 100%. I mean, because at that point, I had lived like sort of this, like, I don't know if it's a lie, but maybe this deception people do, especially if they in families with alcohol, and they're like, I'm not going to be like my mom. I'm not going to be like my dad. Right. And they become a social drinker, and they don't really have the problem that they saw their parents have, 10 o'clock drunks and, losing time and just all kind of stuff. That slow deception started to creep, because when loss happens, when accumulated unresolved losses, which is basically what I had in a 10-year period, show up in your life, the slide to more and more medication is real.
So, so you fell to it more in 2014, that time frame roughly. What, how are you these days, year 2021, and assuming you're good, and I believe you are, how did you get out of it? How did you move out of it?
It's the craziest story. Like, I quit coffee, alcohol, and cigarettes all in the same weekend.
Wait, in one weekend?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a bit of a.
You're a glutton for punishment.
I'm a bit of a. Well, I got to the point where I just, I found myself continuing to do the same thing, and realizing that all that I had learned, I was isolated. Again, it's this thing where like, you ever heard this before? Like, we don't need any more knowledge. Like, you think about it, if you look at your life, I look at mine, like, I don't need any more knowledge. That's not an arrogant statement. I need more, like, yeah, can I learn some other things? Sure. But like, where is the application of the knowledge that I have was where I was on that one. Mm-hmm. And so I've really spent a weekend. I was watching, actually, the catalyst was, I was watching, I'm a documentary, just complete dork. I don't know what clicked, man. I was watching these documentaries of these people that had lost limbs, people that had gone through the Holocaust. I did like a weekend binge after a heavy night. And something clicked, and I was like, I felt like God was saying, like, what else? You don't have anything to be depressed about. You've come through this thing. You've come through a decade of loss on the heels of, all these challenges as a child. What do you, look at what you have upstairs and downstairs. And it was my kids, and that was the turning point. And I never looked back.
So let's get back to, like I said a minute ago, you being such a big advocate and champion for men. And quite candidly, I've been following you for a while, but I think it was some posts that you made on social media, on LinkedIn specifically, over the last many months that really drew my attention, quite frankly, just to kind of give you some positive, good feedback. You post great stuff, don't get me wrong, but to me personally, and I don't know, maybe I'm the only one, but I doubt it. When you started posting about, and again, I just use the term champion and advocate for men. When you started posting in that realm, that caught my attention. And really, I'll tell you why. For me, it's just simply because of, the environment that we live in and as a society over the last forever, for sure, but definitely over the last few years, where men are I don't want to call them the victim, but men are out there being trashed in the media more than ever. Women's rights issues, et cetera. And I'm all for it. I have a teenage daughter and a wife, happily married. But at the same token, I think there needs to be some type of counterbalance, and it can't just be one-sided to make it even for years past. That's my opinion. I don't know what you would say.
Well, I think true feminists want what we've seen in mainstream media isn't true feminism in terms of, where that comes from, the things around, you talk about like what happened with Harvey Weinstein and Me Too and all
Right.
that. I mean,
Sure.
legitimate needs to call out and arrest, incarcerate, discipline, whatever word you want to use, men who are, out abusing women in those ways has been somehow, and I think it's been called out. I mean, true feminism has called it out.
Sure.
The people that have used, and I'm not going to throw names out because I'm really not up on it, but have used those movements as power grabs in situations that are not a Harvey Weinstein situation. I mean, I think for me, and at least what I teach my kids here and the people that I circles I run in, are keen on that. All right. But, how do we get there is the real question. How do we get there? And what do our men need to know now? What does it mean to, where do you learn about, being responsible and like you said, you're happily married, getting and staying married and, really having an open conversation on, one of the biggest challenges we're facing in this country isn't anything this administration or the previous administrations have said. It's what we are doing and not doing in our homes to raise responsible men and women, and fatherlessness. I mean, let's be fair. There's more fatherlessness than there is motherlessness in this world, but specifically in this country. And so if I can take, the fatherlessness that touched, my dad's side for sure, not so much my mother's side, but touched me and my brother's life, that almost won the battle in terms of that being passed on to me and my generation, specifically my kids. I mean, my kids are with me full time, basically. I mean, 2 are full time and 2 of the half the time, and have a great working relationship with my son's mother. That's not the ideal situation, but they're here. I'm involved. If I can take something to help men be better than what I saw or didn't see, that's to me, that just makes, I always say, like wisdom and experience that sits on the shelf just collects dust. At some point you lose it. If you don't, and I don't mean out there pontificating. Okay. Sometimes I think some of my content can come off like that. I think we all sort of battle that maybe. But really behind the scenes, it's what happens off the post. It's what happens, at Starbucks, unfortunately, with face masks on, listening to a guy tell a story, and all of a sudden the tears start going because now for the first time he's sitting across from another guy who's been there, who's seen that, whatever the challenges are. I mean, I don't know how involved you are, but I've heard all kinds of horrific stories from men, mainly men, some women, but mainly men, on what they went through growing up. And so if I can give back, that's great. Yeah,
I mean, don't get me wrong, it's more than a quote unquote few, but it kind of reminds me of the old saying, the old adage, don't let a few apples ruin the bunch, or a few rotten eggs ruin the dozen. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't believe we're talking about the mass majority. It just happens to be the center of attention and grabs the focus, particularly of mainstream media. And so I agree with what you talked about. And I think that you tell me if I'm wrong, I feel like you becoming a champion and advocate for men is because you've had some positive, influential men in your life that has helped you so massively as you were going through the challenges in 2014, 15, all the way through 17 when you took that leap of faith. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, and thing is for me, and I think it affects everybody differently, but for me, it wasn't like this click. It just something to me, when I was going through that time, this is before I was on social media. I had these for 2 years straight. I just had these wonderful people. It was men and women, my divorce care group that I went through with was mainly women. I mean, you're talking about, like, I'm sitting there, whatever, I'm early 40s, and I'm sitting there listening to women who are in their 60s, 30 years of marriage, and boom, guy walks away, takes everything. And that's a mild example. When you're sitting there listening to, and it was mainly women, there was men too, people just pour their hearts out week after week as you're sitting there, don't get me wrong, feeling sorry for yourself, but like trying to relate to them and share your story, and, you know, let your edge meet theirs, and you're ministering to their hearts when they're doing the same with you, and this kind of thing. You start to realize, like, man, I'm okay. You know, 30 years, wakes up and finds out that, you know, their spouse has decided that they want to be in a same-sex relationship. That is traumatic for someone to go through. 30 years of deception. And I heard worse stories than that, abuse, all kinds of things. So that really pushed me. Maybe it pulled me, Eric. I don't know if it's a push, but that pulled me into, you know, and that's where the writing started. You know, when I started doing the writing, I never planned to work with men. My therapist at the time was teaching me how to grieve all of my losses. And it came through the writing.
So talk about that, because you said you've written more than 2,000 journals about your life and losses and so forth. You know, have you always been a quote unquote writer? Have you always been into writing as a kid growing up? Did you all of a sudden just start putting pen to paper and the rest was history? Like, how'd that happen?
Well, it was up until 2017. It was about 2,000, somewhere just over 2,000. But since then, it's over about 8,500, which includes voice notes, because I do it every day. No, I'm not a writer, and, like, you know, I can't write very good on a piece of paper. So I could have, without a phone or audio transcription device or anything, I probably would have never done it. If it was just like pen and paper, pencil, I would have probably never done it. No, it came from that summer. You know, I was in a session with, we were doing marital counseling together, and then we were doing individual counseling. So this poor therapist saw the Chapman clan 3 times a week. It's insane. It really was this thing. One day I was in a session with her, the therapist, and she asked me, you know, my father's still alive, but we were just talking about my dad, and I was probably feeding her some line that, you know, I'd sold myself that, you know, I'm healed when I'm probably not, and who knows, probably some nonsense. And she was the kind that could listen for about 48 minutes towards the end, and then say, like, one question, and the sky would open up, you know, with like thoughts and epiphany, and knowledge and whatever. And she said to me, this was in the summer, she said, you know, have you ever grieved the loss of your father? You know, he's still alive. And she meant, you know, the loss of the father you didn't have. And I was like, yeah, when I was 23, I saw an Oprah episode and learned from probably Dr. Phil or somebody to sit down, you know, a teddy bear in a chair and talk to your loved one or loss, whatever, and do the forgiveness thing. Because he's been a drunk. I mean, right now he's down in a hospital with dementia, but he would have been drunk back then. I probably had 6 or 7 total conversations with the guy where he was sober. And I said, I did that. And she stopped me. She said, no, have you ever grieved the loss of your father with your heavenly father? And she was talking about God. And when she said that, sort of my you know, a veil came down, and I realized, and she took me on a path and taught me how to do that through writing, which was really to model what David did in the Psalms. And if you read the Psalm, it's pretty hard to read it with an open mind and realize this guy was pouring his heart out. He was complaining, he was cheering, he was doing everything under the sun towards what he believed was his father. And she taught me how to do that. And that's where it started. I started writing. I've written every day since then. So
Michael, when's your first book coming out?
Well, I started and I wrote about 3 chapters, and I quit. I shouldn't say quit. I put a comma on it 2 years ago. Because some of the stuff, Yes, exactly. Some of the stuff was, you know, I just decided, like, some of it was, hey, I don't really want to do it. some of that's part of that. But I think for more tactical reasons, some of the stuff that I wrote about was still playing out. And I just haven't picked it back up. I haven't, I still write, but it's just, I let it, I'm sort of doing it like, I'm doing it like sort of in the public space or podcasts like this or whatever, in bits and pieces. And at some point, I'm sure it'll click, but there's enough copy there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like for you, it's more cathartic as well. It's more, it's a release. It's spiritual for you. It's
really about, it's the one thing that I teach men how to do is, because I have strong opinions and I have what most people have. I'm pretty normal, but the writing is really more about really examining what's going on the inside. Because if it's an ugly thing that comes out on the digital note, it's staring me back in the face. And I'm really interested in understanding, is there something going on in me that's affecting something on the outside? And if so, I want to understand that and shore that up. It's still that guy that's using what she taught me to shore up what's going on inside of me and to keep that part of me, not perfect, because no one is, but cleaner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in our last handful or so of minutes, and I'm not rushing you, I want to get into how you parlayed all that you've been going through over those years, and the divorce and the toxic relationship with your boss and all that stuff you already described, how you parlayed that into sales training and brand training and social media coaching, and really how you parlayed it into creating and co-founding LeadIn Social. Maybe walk us through that, because you didn't do that very long after the August 2017 epiphany.
Yeah, I mean, it first started with, the sales coaching. A good friend of mine in Australia, Rana Cordai, her and I, became friends on LinkedIn in late 2017. She is among other things, she's a sales coach. She's got so many courses that she does to help businesses and entrepreneurs. We just became like LinkedIn friends, and, she was looking to co-brand. I was already out putting videos. She was looking to co-brand sales for non-salespeople, a curriculum that she had written. She was looking for a co-partner to brand it. And so we became friends. And we put it out there as a course we did together. It's 30 days of sales content. How did I get into it? When I left UPS in early 2000, I realized, like, when I went into B2B sales, like I was pretty good at it. I could go make friends. I could have conversations and do some of the basics that I had learned to do in operations at UPS. I mean, it's the same transferable skill to stand up in front of a group of 400 people and lead them, convince them to influence them to do something in a heavily organized labor environment that they probably don't want to do. It's the same transferable skill to do that than it would be to sit, walk into someone's front door. So I got into B2B sales, and I did that until really I left the company in 2017 in the uniform rental industry. I did a couple of changes. I got out of the industry a couple of times, but I just took that into that relationship with her, and we put together the course. It's a 30-day online course. That was one. I was doing the side hustle thing. That was one of these things, because I kept saying no to positions. I probably got 10 or 15 opportunities. Most of it was to relocate or to travel from 2017 until the spring of 18. And I kept saying no, because my why was, listen, I got to be near my kids, geographically and emotionally. So if I felt like it was going to be toxic, or I felt like I was going to have to move, I was just saying no. So that was one of those things that I did to get off the ground, to have another stream of revenue. At the same time, I was putting out content 2-3 times a day, and I was just growing the things I was talking about. Men would knock on my digital door and say, hey, I read your post about this, I'd love to talk to you about it. And at some point I was like, some of this I'll do as purpose work, but some of this I could monetize, because I could see, I'm a pretty much, when I work with you, we get right to the problem pretty quick, and we move pretty quickly through, where you are and where you want to be. And that's just the way I've been my whole career, but as a coach for sure. But I kept doing the writing. And so I was coaching people and showing people how to use the platform in very sparse ways. Towards the end of 2018, and I had gotten another position. I'd gotten an individual contributor role that kept me at home to sustain me trying to get this thing off the ground, In late 2018, that's when I met Sonia Somatsky, who had started a business the year before, helping people do direct messaging outreach. She had started a business with like no business experience, to really provide a non-bot driven, experience for people on LinkedIn. And that next year, we just, we became friends, and we put those two business models together, where now we do direct messaging outreach for people that don't have the time to do it, but they don't want the bot thing. They want like a human being doing the messaging for them, as well as co-create branded content and post it and drive engagement to it. So that was never a plan. It was never a plan. It was one of those things where you realize you have skills and you're using them in a public space, or you're using them in a space that you probably haven't used, and opportunity just finds you.
I mean, I find a lot of times, often, the best things are not planned. I don't know, in my opinion, you just do, right? The journey is going to be what the journey is. And I talk about it all the time. The journey is more often, in my opinion, more fun and better than the destination. How many times have, you can think about even a vacation where you pump it up in your mind to get to the destination, and you realize the journey with the family and the stories at the airports and the, joking and people watching at the airport.
It doesn't go as planned.
Yeah, I mean, that was probably more of a story than even when you get to the beach and it happens to be raining all day. So I mean, yeah, the journey to me is a good thing. So so as we wrap up, let me ask you, what's the difference between a manager and a leader? Because you talked about having a toxic relationship with your manager. Certainly, in my opinion, didn't sound like a leader. So how would you define them both?
I mean, most of us have read this stuff from all the leadership gurus, from Peter Drucker to Jim Collins,
Right.
Whatever. I mean, for me, and I'll use that relationship as an example. He was more interested in managing. He thought managing he genuinely believed that if you had a great process and you manage the process, that would lead the person. And in some cases that's gonna work. But when you have in the person or a group of persons fears, trepidations, they don't all learn the same, they don't understand. And then you have a culture where it's not safe to ask dumb questions. It's not safe to show weakness. It's not safe to show, maybe not weakness, it's not safe to show you don't understand. People are going to lie. People are not going to disclose. They're going to hide, maybe not lie. They're going to hide because they want to keep their job, or they don't want to be ridiculed. They don't want their peer pressure. And so that was what was always happening. When I joined the company, I broke that, because I didn't have a problem getting out in the field with a sales rep or a route guy or a manager and his route guy. That's just what I had done prior to coming to that position. And that made that relationship more, for me, it was intuitive. I mean, get in the field with your people, see what's going on in the hood, and help them find their happiness elsewhere, or give them what they need to be happy here, whatever. That made him that made that relationship insecure for 4.5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that you're a big reader. I know you're a big writer, but you're also a big reader. Are there any maybe 1 or 2 or 3 books that folks listening or watching should write down and go read immediately, or audible read if they're a listener like I am?
I always recommend this one because it's what I use in my practice, but it's Keep Your Love On by Danny Silk. That's a book that—
What is it again? Keep Your Love On?
Keep Your Love On by Danny Silk. I love everything he writes. That book is, when it comes to relationships, there's a lot of stuff that people just don't know that's in that book. It really teaches you what it means to take personal accountability and responsibility around your own power on the inside. It's a book you'd want to put in your kids' hands before they're 15, for sure. You want to bribe them.
Okay.
Because it's really about, and the reason that had such a profound impact on me is because I didn't see that stuff. I didn't see my mother was a terrific mother, but I didn't see male and female relationships play out in front of me. And again, that you can say that till you're about 14. After about 14, it's just an excuse, right?
Yeah.
So, when you get into your 20s and mid 20s and you're getting married and you're having kids and you're doing life, and you don't have those skills to manage conflict and take personal accountability, and let people change when they're ready to change, and, communicate honest information. First off, understand what's going on inside of you, and then be able to articulate in a meaningful way to create a connection, and not, instead of what he talks about as distance. That book is the answer for that.
Awesome. I love it.
You'll read it in a week. You'll read it in a weekend. You won't want to put it down, especially if you're in a relationship. There's any relationship stuff going on in your life, moderately so. It's a call to action for sure.
All right. I like it. Well, listen, Michael, I appreciate you coming on, man. It's been a blast getting to know you more. I feel like I know you just over the years that I've been following you, but certainly not all the details that you talked about today. For those folks that are listening that have a question or comment or want to reach out to you, I know, you're super social. So go find Michael David Chapman on LinkedIn. It's not hard to find, and join the hundreds of thousands of followers that are already in the know. And I believe the website for your company it's just leadinsocial.com, correct?
LeadInSocial.com. That's right.
Yeah, leadinsocial.com to check out more. And Michael's super social. I mean, I never met the guy. I never really talked to him. And we just had a quick little direct message conversation on LinkedIn. And over the months, we've just kind of chatted here and there. And, I don't feel unique or special. I'm sure you do that with a lot of people, which is good. That's a good thing. I want people to realize that you're a human being. As you said, you're not a bot.
Everybody behind those numbers are just people. I'm
Exactly.
a big voice texter too. So,
There you go. There you go. And we'll end with, I love your words of wisdom right there on your profile where Michael says the heart can be fickle, so don't follow it, lead it. So with that, I appreciate you coming on, Michael. For anybody that wants to reach out, please do so directly to Michael. If you have questions, comments, thoughts, please put them in the comment section below, wherever you're watching or listening to this on social media or wherever you consume podcasts. It takes a village, right? That's the term out there. And I can't do all this on my own. So everybody behind the scenes at the RockstarsRocking podcast, I appreciate everybody listening today. I'm Eric Silverman. That is Michael David Chapman. And you just watched or listened to another episode of RockstarsRocking. Until next week, we'll see you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the RockstarsRocking podcast. If you haven't done so already, make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you consume podcasts. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a review. 5 stars would totally rock. Until next time, rock stars, keep rocking.